Hey guys, boy, we left Edmund in a bad place in both his personality and in the snow, right? So he was on his way to the White Witch's castle and he was in snowdrifts and he was cold and wet and bruised, but his attitude was also cold and wet and bruised, wasn't it? All he was thinking about was being the king and paying back Peter, blaming Peter. Not a good idea. But at last he came to a part where it was more level and the valley opened out, and there, on the other side of the river, quite close to him, in the middle of a little plain between two hills, just as she told him, he saw what must be the White Witch's house, and the moon was shining brighter than ever. The house was really a small castle. It seemed to be all towers, little towers with long pointed spires and sharp little needles. You know what? I would think the White Witch's house would be very pointy, don't you? They looked like huge dunce caps or sorcerer's caps, and they shone in the moonlight. Their long shadows looked strange on the snow. Edmund began to be very afraid of the house. Looks like a scary place. But it was too late to think about turning back now. He crossed the river on the ice and walked up to the house. There was nothing stirring, not the slightest sound anywhere. Even his own feet made no noise on the deep, newly fallen snow. He walked on and on, past the corner of the house and past the turret after turret. You guys know what a turret is? It's like a little thing that comes out like this. I always wanted a turret on my house. So did Bella. Someday we're going to have a turret with a library in it. It'll be awesome. But not at the White Witch's house. And he found a door. He had to go right around to the far side before he found it. It was a huge arch, but the great iron gate stood wide open. Uh-oh. Edmund crept up to the arch and looked inside to the courtyard. And there he saw a sight that nearly made his heart stop beating. Just inside the gate, with the moonlight shining on it, stood an enormous lion, crouched as if it were ready to spring, and Edmund stood in the shadow of the arch, afraid to go on and afraid to go back, with his knees knocking together. He stood there so long that his teeth would have been chattering with cold, even if they had not been chattering with fear. How long this really lasted, I don't know, but it seemed to Edmund to last for hours. Then, at last, he began to wonder why the lion was standing so still, for it hadn't moved 1 inch since his first set eyes on it. Edmund now ventured a little nearer, still keeping in the shadow of the arch as much as he could. He now saw from the way the lion was standing that it couldn't have been looking at him at all. But supposing it turns up its head, thought Edmund. In fact, it was staring at something else, namely a little dwarf who stood with his back to it about 4 feet away. Aha, thought Edmund. When it springs at the dwarf, then will be my chance to escape. But still the lion never moved, nor did the dwarf. And now, at last, Edmund remembered what the others had said about the White Witch turning people into stone. Perhaps this was only a stone lion, and as soon as he thought that, of what he noticed, and the lion's back and the top of his head were covered with snow. He just noticed that. Of course it must be a statue. No living animal would have let itself be covered with snow. Then very slowly, and with his heart beating as fast like it would burst, Edmund ventured up to the lion. Even now he hardly dared touch it, but at last he put out his hand very quickly and did it. Then it was cold stone. He had been frightened of a mere statue. The relief which Edmund felt was so great that in spite of the cold, he suddenly got warm all over, right down to his toes, and at the same time there came into his head what seemed a perfectly lovely idea. Probably, he thought, This is the great lion Aslan that they were talking about. She's caught him already and turned him into stone. So that's the end of all their fine details. All about him. Poop, who's afraid of Aslan? And he stood there gloating over the stone lion, and presently he did something very silly and childish. He took a stump of lead pencil out of his pocket and scribbled a mustache on the lion's upper lip and then a pair of spectacles on it. So he made a mustache and glasses on him, on the statue. Then he said, "Yeah, silly old Aslan, how do you like being a stone? You thought yourself mighty fine, didn't you? But in spite of the scribbles on it, the face of the great stone beast looked so terrible and sad and noble, staring up at the moonlight, that Edmund didn't really get any fun out of it. He turned away and began to cross the courtyard." So I think he was a little nervous still, and he thought maybe putting a funny face on it would help him out, but it didn't. As he got into the middle of the courtyard, he saw that there were dozens of statues all about, standing here and standing there, rather as the pieces standing on a chessboard when it's halfway through the game. So have you guys ever played chess and there's all kinds of pieces? That's what those statues look like. There were so many of them. There were stone wolves and bears and fox and catamountains of snow, and there were lovely stone shapes that looked like women, but who were really spirits of trees, and there were great centaur shapes and a winged horse and a long creature that Edmund took to be a dragon. Whoa, it's a lot of creatures. They all looked so strange, standing there perfectly lifelike and also perfectly still in the bright, cold moonlight, that it was eerie work crossing the courtyard. Right in the middle, the very middle, stood a huge shape like a man, but as tall as a tree, with a fierce face and shaggy beard and a great club in its right hand. Even though he knew that it was only a stone giant and not a live one, Edmund did not like going past it. He now saw that there was a dim light showing from the doorway on the far side of the courtyard. He went in. There was a flight of stone steps going up to an open door. Edmund went up them. Across the threshold lay a great wolf. What do you think's in the doorway? There's a wolf guarding it. Who do you think's there? All right, don't be too scared. I'm a little scared, but I think it's going to be okay. All right, I'll see you tomorrow.